Hello and welcome to another episode of the MXGP Podcast Show on Vital MX. The Indonesian doubleheader has been and gone. Lombok hosted its second Grand Prix in as many weeks. A different track, somewhat, depends on your definition of a different track, but certainly a more successful event, I would say, and plenty of storylines to unpack on this episode of the podcast show. I'm your host, Lewis Phillips, as per usual, and I would like to extend my gratitude to Polosport, EVS Sports, and All Balls Racing, and also my gratitude to my co-host, who is doing this whilst on vacation. It's Paddock Pass podcast man, Adam Wheeler. How are you, Adam?
Hey, Lewis. Yes, I'm trying to have a vacation, but then after doing back-to-back MotoGP rounds, which I think I said on the last podcast, stretches to like a 5 or 6 day stint of work. You put two of those back to back, and then by the end, you're kind of like, I don't really care if I see another motorcycle going fast. Yeah, it's a little intense, but I still sort of have work every day, so trying to manage that really. How are you?
I'm okay, living my best life, trying to figure out if I'm going to Lommel. Do I go to Lommel? Should we start a poll on this podcast? The two listeners can
Yes.
vote. And high chance that we end up with a 50-50 vote, but hey ho, maybe we don't. No, I think I should go to Lommel. I do need to pull the pin on that. Sounds like there could be some interesting stuff going on. Watch this space, I guess. So if you didn't listen last week we did the whole why are we racing in Indonesia? Is it worth it? Is it a waste of time? Etc. 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 I felt like we were actually very positive about Indonesia. May shock you to learn that someone thinks we were very negative. The second Grand Prix, reversed track, more fans. It's fine. Again, I would much rather have two different tracks, two completely different venues, but I understand that this was just a 1 year thing. Actually, I still don't know why Sumbawa was even cancelled, but considering there was an issue, this was a solution. I think it worked out quite okay.
I think the second edition of this Grand Prix looks a bit stronger than the first, Lewis. Also in terms of public attendance as well. So maybe word got out that, MXGP was happening and it was kind of cool and it was something fast and exciting. And, I kind of like those higher drone shots that we had on the TV production that showed sort of the runway and everything. I mean, it really was just like, let's drop a motocross track into a very strange location and run a Grand Prix. And they seem to have fixed a little bit of the watering problem they had in the first Grand Prix. It looked a little bit more consistent in terms of the dirt. And arguably, I think we had some pretty decent racing as well. So, I don't think the teams complain too much about being in a sort of Paradise Island setting for a couple of days in between Grand Prix. But I thought it seemed like a better second Indonesian Grand Prix of the week.
It's crazy because MXGP posted an Instagram post of the fans at the podium, and it looks like a nations setting. So that in itself justifies going to Indonesia. It justifies that they aren't lying. There really are fans who want to see this in other countries. And yeah, if I'm MXGP, I'm spreading those photos far and wide because it essentially gets them out of the shit with some people who want to complain and complain.
Well, ironically, it's if the first Grand Prix wasn't West Nusa Tenggara, if that Grand Prix wasn't promoted well enough and the crowd was not as big as they hoped, then actually staying in the same location for 7 days and running the same thing again, although, like you said, the track was reversed, actually worked out. I don't sort of have any official crowd numbers, and you can't put that much stock in them anyway. But it did look visually busier, so I think that was pretty much a box ticked.
We're going to do a slightly different theme with this podcast because ultimately, same venue, same results for the most part. We've got a lot to say about Herlings, but apart from that, it was all very similar. Silly season is still on hold until some big things happen, so we've got to wait a couple of weeks for that. So instead, we are going to grade the top five in each class, say, on their season so far. Bit of debate, bit of a different vibe. Maybe it'll be good. I'm sure there will be some tangents. For instance, I'd love to talk about the fact that Josh Coppens is doing a guided tour of the MXGP of Australia. think that's the best idea ever, and I'd really like everyone to pay me to do that. So maybe we get onto that. But yeah, we're gonna follow that format, slightly different to normal. Before
But
we
first,
do,
Lewis, right?
oh,
I mean, you got to read first, because first I have a question, Jeffrey Herlings question for you. But
I'll
if you need to do your read, do your
I'll
read.
do a read. Why not? Let's do a read. Why not? Hey, Yamaha YZ125 or 250 riders, this one's for you. If you've been riding models from 2002 to 2021, listen up, because Polosport has something that's going to make your heart race. They are introducing the new restyling kit, a complete transformation for your Yamaha, giving your bike a 2024 look without any complicated modifications. The kit includes everything you need: a new gas tank, a full race seat, an airbox, and it's all designed to fit seamlessly. No fuss, no hassle, just a fresh design that breathes new life into your dirt bike. Your old YZ two-stroke will look like it just rolled off the showroom floor. So, to all the YZ125 or 250 owners out there, it's time to transform your bike. Your Yamaha deserves it. Holosport has what you need. I feel like that read needs more Polosport in it, because up until the final sentence, you really don't know where it's going. But then maybe that's dramatic suspense. Thank you, Polosport, for your continued support of the podcast. Your question, Adam.
So this was round 12, right? Last weekend of MXGP 2024. Jeffrey Herlings now has 8 podiums, 7 of which have come in the last 7 Grand Prix. And from the last 4 races, he's gone 1, 2, 2, 1. Is this part of the plan? Is this the comeback? And do you think, he'll be celebrating another championship? I think it's 7th in total. And we say, wow, that was, part of the master plan. Actually, it'd be 6, not his 7th, right? I mean, 2 in MXGP and 3 in MX2.
Well, let me say this. I don't know if he wins, but I am running to the final GP, because I'm pretty certain that it's going to go down to the wire and be quite tasty when we get to that point. It's almost laughable that what he's been saying all along has actually come true to the T. And I feel like we all doubted him. I feel like he even doubted his own plan. But it's so on the nose of the second half of the season that, I wonder if he is just like, yep, he's got a little whiteboard at home. It's got a little roadmap on it. And he's like, yep, here we go. Yep, round 12. Yep, that's right where I need to be. Lockett will be it could throw a spanner in the works. It could be a massive setback. Obviously, we know his history there. And even without that history, it's not his best playing field. It certainly favors Prado and Tim Gajser, although even Gajser hasn't been exceptional there, despite what you would think. It's exciting. Honestly, he's coming. And let's not forget, because I do not believe we've done a good enough job of publicizing this, he lost 25 points due to a mechanical. Take that out, and I think he's your favorite at this point. The mechanical will likely end up being very pivotal when it comes to the final rounds of the championship.
Yeah, but then Jorge Prado was also taken out by Valentin Guillot in Majora, so that cost him 25 points as well. And, something blameless.
I look at a mechanical as that's completely out of a rider's hands. I look at a first turn crash as like it's a racing incident. So it's more par for the course for what they're doing, whereas a mechanical is just, what can you do?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, it's a motorsport. I think there's going to be more incidents like that. There is going to be collisions or some sort of freak thing that trips up maybe Tim Gajser as well as, Jorge Prado as well, again, possibly even Herlings. But the thing is, Lewis, he goes 1-1-1, obviously the qualification heat win, and then 1-1 for the first time in well over a year. In fact, the last time he won both motos was the 2023 Latvian Grand Prix, which was also his last win, prior to, when was it, Latvia this year. And it comes just in a slightly unlikely place because, Herlings is obviously one of the fittest riders in the gate. We all know how hard he works. The track was inconsistent. I mean, it was sandy in places, hard pack in others. You wouldn't have said, oh yes, Jeffrey Herlings is going to come back from Indonesia with, a complete slate of dominance. but he made it work. And the thing is, I think he's really got his tail up now. In the next 4 Grand Prix, Czech Republic, like you said, is hard pack at Lockett. That's a little bit of a misnomer that could go any way for him. But then 2 of the 3 following tracks are going to be in deep sand. And if you are Tim Gajser or you are Jorge Prado, who are good sand riders as well, Roman Febvre, you think might be coming back, as well as Jago Gertz potentially to Lommel. There are people that could possibly get in the way or make things slightly more difficult than they currently are in MXGP. But, if you're Herlings and you're gaining ground in the championship, you've got that momentum and that swing of results behind you, then, he's laughing.
I did want to address that because it was such an uptick when we got to Indonesia that even I started to wonder this and look into this. Is there any part of Lombok that makes you go, well, that just favors Herlings? There's no question that he would have got there and just come alive. Look at it. It perfectly suits this about him, because I can understand. That was my first thought, because it was such a drastic upturn in performance. But after watching 2 rounds there, really trying to think and come up with a solution or a theory for this, I can't. There's nothing about Lombok that screams Jeffrey Herlings to me.
A crucial factor as well, and I'll be keen to sort of find this out when we get to Lommel for the Belgian GP, is what KTM have done to help him with his starts, because those were key ingredients towards that success. I don't think we saw earlier in the season that Herlings was conceding positions and a few seconds and some margin on the track to the likes of Prado and Gajser and Roman Febvre. And, it was too difficult for him to peg back with the rhythm and the kind of race conditioning he had at the time. Now, I think it'll be pretty interesting to see what would happen if Herling starts 5th or 6th. But yeah, he's vying for whole shots, and that's really keeping him out of trouble and just making life more easy.
Is it possible, and I don't believe this because the top riders are there, but is it possible that having 15 riders on the gate helps him with starts because there's less chance of him being shuffled back? Even if he gets a mediocre start, there's more room. You can kind of just make the best of it. Whereas when there's 30 riders, more chance for 20th place rider tags someone up ahead, more stuff happens. Is that at all on the cards here?
Yes. Even just like you say, from a perspective of real estate on the track, it's got to be more favorable. But then, you don't have to worry too much about the lappers, which were problems a little bit in St. John and also in Germany more. So it kind of can swing both ways, can be advantaged in both ways. But the thing is, if I was Prado, if I was Gajser, I'd be thinking, shit, Herlings has just won. He's won every race there was on that weekend, and he could have done the same the previous weekend in Indonesia. It's almost like, wow, he's coming. He's got the bit between his teeth. Pick whatever cliche you want to apply. So I would be a little bit more anxious. Whereas up until now, sort of round 10, at least halfway stage of the season, Prado can look back at several GPs and think, well, I've had the measure of him. So it'd be, if he dominates in Lockett, then I think, we have to talk seriously about, it's only a matter of time before that point gap just shrinks to nothing.
Oh, if he goes 1-1 at Lockett, that will be the most drastic shift in a championship dynamic maybe ever. Because realistically, I would bet money that he will go 2-3 at Lockett. He'll be in that podium fight. Either Prado or Tim will run away with it. One of the motos, he'll squeak a second. And that's fine. But the problem is, when you are facing a deficit like he is, you are kind of, you can't really afford to have races like that are essentially missed opportunities. But if he goes 1-1, wow. So before we get onto the grading, do this. Title percentages amongst the top 3. I'll go first. And actually, it's really hard. I almost want to go as far as doing 33% for each of them, because I don't actually know. Honestly, I'm at a loss. Who do you want to give the edge to? Gajser, because yes, he is 34 points clear. But then, is Gajser the man on form at the moment? I don't think so. But then Prado also has just kind of had a bit of a blip, maybe his first major blip of the season, because the other poor results were down to mud races. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to do the most boring answer. 33% across the board. Absolutely no idea what's going to happen. Let's go race.
I would still shade it a little bit in Prado's favor. Just talking about the next Grand Prix in Lockett, that was also where he took his first win on the Gas. It's been a pretty good track for him in the past, and one of those tracks where it's very tight, it's very narrow. If you get a good start, then that's almost like half the job done. Tricky to overtake. Both Herlings and Gajser have had some big moments of that circuit in the past. I mean, Herlings in particular, in his first season, dislocated his shoulder in 2010, and then 2015 dislocated his hip after he was struck by Jordi Tixier, the defending world champion at the time. So it's been, it's been a track that has been good, but also pretty dramatic for at least two of the championship contenders. But I would say, yeah, I mean, I would put 40% still on Prado and then divvy up the rest. I mean, go 30-30 between Jeffrey and Gajser. But yes, like you say, it's hard to call, but it's cool. I mean, I really hope all three of them keep in it right to the end.
Well, how many times have we gone to Lockett with a rider 100 points clear? This is much better than what we've had more often than not over the last decade. But
and it has to be said, actually, that going to Lockett in the past, not only is it the scene of European Junior Championships, so there's usually more classes racing on a track that does take a beating anyway, but we've seen some fantastic last moto, last lap scenarios in the Women's World Championship as well there. It has been a bit of I wouldn't say it's a circuit for a turning point in the championship, but I think the fact that it's always paired with Lommel and you have these two utter extremes like stony, marbly, hard pack and then straight into deep sand means that it's quite a sort of critical phase of the season.
Well, I've always said Lockett to me is the beginning of the end. When I walked into Lockett, I was like, season's almost over. Like, here we are. This is the final run now. So I do think that the ante gets upped, and Lockett's just been a cruel mistress. Herlings has had bad luck there. Josh Coppins has had bad luck there.
Who wins, Lewis?
The championship or Lockett?
No, Lockett, the Czech GP.
I think Prado. My heart says Tim because you think slick hard pack, you think Tim, but actually it's a Prado track if you believe the results. So I believe Prado, and in fact, I would say that it is a must-win for Prado after the second Indonesian event. Because realistically, although there's 17 points between Prado and Herlings, that's effectively irrelevant. So Prado needs to worry about the fact that he is basically level with Herlings and needs to get away from him as well as close down Tim. And Lockett is a prime opportunity.
Yeah, because again, a result in Lommel is going to be monumental. I mean, if you can beat Jeffrey at Lommel, then that is a big statement. In fact, I would almost say go into Lommel if I can get on the podium and keep the points damage to a minimum, then that's like a decent weekend. So perhaps, yeah, you're right. The onus is more on Jorge for Lockett. But I mean, it's just cool that we can talk about this. It's not just like one or two riders. There's three of them, and Tim is really strong. I mean, he's heading most of the charts. He's got exactly 12 sort of red plate definitions of the season, the same as Prado. I think he's got the most podium finishes as well this year. And I was a little not disappointed, but what did you think in the second moto? Because he was charging after Jeffrey. And, I think there was a point where you could visibly see Herlings looking over his shoulder just to check what was going on. And then he sort of dropped the hammer, improved his lap times and just sort of disappeared away from Gajser. But I really thought the Honda man was going to be able to make an interesting dash for it, because if he had passed Herlings and won, that would have been the overall.
Yeah, and actually, going back to what we said about Lombok as a track, I think I would have pointed to that as a Gajser track if I was going to give it to anyone. But is that a crucial turning point in the championship now? When we look back at the end of the season, is that the moment that Herlings kind of put doubt into Gajser's mind?
No, I think we have to wait until after Lockett, like you say. I mean, that's the pivotal point. I mean, also, it's the sort of thing you never really know because you don't read about it in the reports or the press releases necessarily. But it's, how has the week been for them in Indonesia? Has there been any sort of runs to the toilet, any dodgy sort of food going around, maybe some illness or whatever, just acclimatizing to the heat and the humidity. There's just these little factors that can affect performance.
certainly interesting. But I do think that we are talking about what's coming up, sand tracks, Lommel, etc., etc. If you're Gajser especially, because I think that Prado, in fact, I will say it now, Prado wins a race at Lommel. Whether that's qualifying or the motos, he definitely steals one from Jeffrey. I think he's that good in the sand. But if you're Gajser, I imagine you look at that second moto where a win was possible and you go, shit, like I'm not going to have an opportunity at Lommel. I could have really done with that one just to ease my self-doubt or whatever you want to call it as we head into these tracks where I know I'm going to be facing an uphill battle. I think that for Gajser's psyche, not winning in Indonesia is actually quite damaging.
Well, was that kind of common then? What sort of grade would you give him for this year, considering he's the championship leader?
Funny because that's hard. My initial reaction is A. It's certainly not an A plus.
Oh, are we doing letters or numbers here?
Oh, would you rather do numbers?
Also, out of 10, maybe is a little bit easier, right?
I don't know. I find that harder.
Oh, okay.
Let's do,
Yeah, well, we can stick to numbers. It's a bit more sort of old-fashioned, isn't it?
wait, letters or numbers?
Letters.
Okay, letters, right. It's not an A plus. It's
Why isn't it an A plus?
because he's only won one GP outright.
2.
France doesn't count.
Oh God.
It just doesn't. I said outright as well. That was
Okay.
my statement. He's only won one GP outright. He's a championship leader, but at no point has he grabbed this by the balls and made this like this is mine. So it's not an A plus, can't be. My initial reaction was A, but I think I go A minus because you know what? I do not believe that we have seen Tim Gajser at his best really at all this year. Maybe fleeting moments, but I still feel like I'm waiting for more to come from Gajser because I believe that he has more to offer.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would even go for a B plus because, he, like I said, in terms of consistency and in terms of holding the red plate, he's doing the job. He has one. I'm going to count his Grand Prix win. I mean, he got it. He's got 2 GP wins. And, we were quite effusive about Jorge Prado's championship last year. And I think Prado only won 2 GPs. Yes, he racked up the trophies. He was on the podium pretty much every weekend or every Grand Prix weekend. And that's what Gajser's kind of doing. So what do we want? Do we need some sort of absurd Jeffrey Herlings season where you're winning 17 out of 19 rounds? Or do we want, a smart, consistent tactical season where you're having 3 race starts every single Grand Prix? I think, Herlings Gajser is there with a B plus. And, the only thing that's holding me back from say like an A is the fact that, we just haven't seen that implementation of the speed that we're talking about. What, like you say, I think we used to really seeing Tim sometimes grab a Grand Prix by the scruff of the neck and say, right, okay, guys, I'm off today. Try and catch me. And we haven't really seen much of that. But, the same way that we're giving Herlings a little bit of a pass for somewhat of a lackluster start to the season, I think we also have to give Tim a little bit of leeway because of that broken femur last year. And, the amount of time it took him to come back to confidence and full form from that.
Yeah, to your point, at any moment this year have we gone, wow, in regards to a Tim Gajser performance? We just haven't. And to be honest, you could say up until Indonesia, we hadn't about Herlings. It was mainly Prado who occupied the wows amongst us, which will make his grade especially interesting. Because if you want to think back to the first 6 rounds, it's an A plus out of the park. But it's peeled off somewhat recently. But as you said, first turn crash, not entirely his fault. So I don't know where you go with this. So you can go first.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Do we base it on last year or are we assuming that he should be better?
I think we just base it on this year in a bubble, based on what we've seen since round 1, what we know.
And also with the backstory in the context of Supercross. I mean, you could also think, how does that affect his attitude and his approach to the season? because he could also throw a bit more caution to the wind and say, right, okay, I want to win more Grand Prix. If that ends up with being the championship, then fine. I'm already MXGP world champion. I'm wearing the big fat number 1 on the bike. So yeah, it's I mean, when I interviewed him in Majora, I just found a guy that was extremely confident, extremely happy with his program, and just someone who wanted to win. He wasn't talking about being tactical or putting together like a championship as he perhaps would have done. And he also said, how winning last year really just took the weight off his shoulders. He's riding freer. I mean, Lewis, this is not a guy who's in the Herlings mold of racking up enormous statistics, or is looking at Stefan Evitz's or Tony Cairoli's vast sort of, slew of championships, thinking that's the numbers I need to get to. So I think, Prado has been a little bit more loose this year. Maybe he's been pushing it a little bit more. You could look at some of the performances and say, well, there's a guy just circulating in third or fourth. How's that pushing it more? But I still think Jorge has another gear to click into. So I'll say another B. Instead of a B plus, I'll say a B.
Okay, this is good because we are basically on different planets. I say an A because he was so good at the start of the year that I have to give him extra credit for that. Real school vibes here. Extra credit for that. Yes, the mud didn't play in his favor, so I subtract some for that. Yes, he had that first turn crash, so I subtract some for that. These factors take him off of an A+, but still, at its core, this has been an incredible season. I do believe. And so I'm not giving him an A+ because there have now been errors, but I still believe we've seen the best Jorge Prado. He has been as I said, he has been the wow man across 12 rounds. And so he's an A for me, which is quite outrageous to maybe give him a better grade than Gajser. But as I said, at his core, he has given us highlights and career best moments this year, and that can't be understated.
Yeah, I would not hard disagree with that. It's a slightly different viewpoint, but I think it's equally valid. I wonder if Prado's pacing of the season might just sort of glide past the others, because obviously he went and did Supercross, came into the start of MXGP super hot and ready, whereas I think Gajser and Herlings were just building their way into the championship, also back from their injury problems. So there wasn't quite a real indication of the rates of competitiveness. I mean, if you want to, I don't know, use a sort of metaphor or a simile kind of thing, then Gajser and Herlings were just warming up for the sprint, whereas Jorge was pumped and ready to go from the first 10 meters. So maybe that's got something to do with it.
Well, watch this space, because I was talking to a rider who was adamant that because Prado was so ready for Supercross, has been racing for so long, there is no way that come Lockett, Lommel, Uddevalla, he is still at 100%. At some point, he has to dip before Gajser and Herlings. You could argue that maybe Lombok too was the first sign of that. I don't believe so, but I will certainly take that opinion into.
Can we also say that he's 5 years younger than those other riders? So maybe that sort of natural youth and, less injuries, less mileage comes into it?
Yes, there's a chance of that for sure. Definitely watch this space, though, I think. And watch this space for Herlings as he makes a run towards the championship. This is a straight B for me.
Oh, I thought you'd have been giving him an A-.
Why should I have?
All right, for flat out results, up until recently, it's been very much like a flat B, maybe a B-. Hasn't been sort of the Herlings we're used to. It's been very unusual watching him settle for positions off the podium. But then he has been doing all the talk about recovering from injury, blah, 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 blah. And it's a long season, blah, 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 blah. Okay. I just thought maybe you would have been a bit more giving him more credit for the slow build-up approach.
I guess I'm not looking at it. I'm not taking in any context. I'm purely looking at it from results. I'm not giving anyone the benefit of the doubt or like, well, we know this. I'm kind of trying to focus solely on what the result sheet says. Because
then I'm saying A-.
Damn it. Well, now. Okay.
But you said a B. I'm saying A- just because he's been built up and, 2 wins out of the last 4 rounds is starting to get back towards sort of the classic Herlings that we know.
You know what? I'll go B plus because he has now won 2 Grand Prix, and that's more than Gajser. So that counts for something. Yes, that is more than Gajser, Adam.
It's
Before
the
you,
same. It's the same as
it's
Tim.
more than Gajser. We all know it's more than Gajser. Um, Vlaanderen.
Wow.
This is where it really gets tricky because me basing it solely off results doesn't work now because I do need to add context. Because basically, if I'm
Yes.
comparing this to Herlings, it's a C. So actually, my whole map is off by quite a way. But anyway, Vlaanderen, you can go first.
No, he's easily an A. He's fourth in the championship. He's got 2 podium finishes. I mean, has there been, I mean, 2 podium finishes in 1 year is probably equaling a career best. Has he maybe got 2 or maybe 3 podium results in one season? He's the sole Yamaha rider. I mean, that can also cripple somebody in terms of in his first season in the factory team. I mean, that can also be a weight that's too much to bear. I think he's really sort of taken on the mantle of being that sole runner for the Blue Crew. I think he's been leading laps. He's made mistakes, yes, but in terms of being sort of the second tier guy that's trying as hard as possible to jump up to the top 3, I think he's done exceptionally well. And when that contract renewal kicks in, then it's well deserved.
Another point to add to that list of accolades, he is clearly the best of the rest. And I don't know if anyone had him ahead of Seewer, ahead of Coldenhoff. Well, maybe you have him ahead of Coldenhoff. Ahead of Seewer, I guess, is really the benchmark here. So I would even go as far as to say it's an A plus because what more can you really want from him? You could say, well, he's won Riola before, so maybe he could have won Riola again. That's pie in the sky in my mind. That's not a realistic expectation. As far as realistic expectations go, I think he's hit all the boxes. Maybe you could say it would have been nice for him to have a podium sooner than round 11, sure, but that's real nitpicking. He's been a revelation.
I think I think he's been great. I think he's done exactly what was expected of him, maybe even a bit more.
Well, speaking of doing what's expected of him and maybe a bit more, what the hell do we do with Jeremy Seewer? Well, first of all, A plus for me because we're now 12 rounds in and he has still only podiumed the race that I was at. So that honestly has to count for something in my resume / whatever else you want to call it. Well done, me. A plus for me, but Seewer.
I mean, there's plenty of context here. I have to say a C, just because, again, he has proved himself to be one of the most valuable members of the MXGP pack because even through some of his troubles, he's remained injury free. He's always there every weekend. He's picking up points. I mean, he's 5th in the championship, like 18 or something behind Vlaanderen. Not even that, I think. I mean, he's a miles away from the top 3. I think it's over it's near 150 points. It's too much. First season on a Kawasaki, by all accounts, he doesn't really like the bike. He's struggling with it, struggling to sort of make it turn and feel his way through the corners. But he's still there all the time. I think he'll be disappointed in this season because he's been superseded a bit by Vlaanderen as a top guy in that second tier. And, he should be running with Gajser, Herlings and Prado. And maybe he would have been if he was still with Yamaha. We don't know. But yeah, I think Jeremy himself will be, maybe giving it a C, or knowing him and his sense of humor, he'll probably say an F.
Yeah, he would say an F. Say I didn't show up for school. I didn't even
Yeah.
sit down. By
Suspended.
the way, when Seewer's 2025 plans come out, we may have to do an entire podcast because there's a lot to unpack there's a lot to unpack. I myself have a lot to say about it. So that's going to be a podcast, especially.
Well, he had plenty to say towards the end of his Yamaha tenure. I mean, it was clear that he was not happy with the way things were organized for him there. I'd like to hear him be publicly transparent about, the setup at Kawasaki and what he's found and how it's either positive in some ways and how it's been sort of prohibitive towards like decent results. And then, what he's going to do next, then that's also going to be something of interest, right? I mean, that's a big leap, but I guess we should, talk about it more when we do that podcast.
Yeah, I'd imagine we will be due some news soon. Quite little.
What about Glenn Coldenhoff then? He's 6. Is that pretty much Coldenhoff territory, or do we expect maybe, he should have given Fantic like a podium finish by now?
I can't remember what his exact words were at the end of last year when I interviewed him, but I kind of so this is a 2-year contract. I almost feel like he said that after 2025 he wants to do another contract. But is this the start of the end? Like, are we looking at this and like, well, this is where Glenn Coldenhoff starts to taper off? We know that Fantic have had issues. It's maybe not the most factory team despite its title. So do you put this on that, or do you look at it and say this is the beginning of just the natural progression of life for Glenn Coldenhoff?
I think the team has the structure and the means. It's just a case of how serious Fantic are.
Yes,
and whether they're gonna, whether they kind of roll into 2025 with more support, or take it a bit more seriously. That's the big question at the moment. But then if the team pivot and say, okay, we're going to go with another brand, then that could really play into Glenn's favor, because he excelled, I think, on Austrian machinery. I'm going to say for a moment that Louis Vosters decides to sort of go to another manufacturer, then it could be a bit of an interesting swan song for Glenn's career. But I think he's 31. He's certainly plus 30. I hope I'm not too far off the mark with that one. But 6th place in the championship is not to be sniffed at, I don't think. But we have had absences, as we've said, and the likes of, say, Mattia Guadagnini sort of riding the factory Husqvarna. You think if he had been fit from the beginning of the season, maybe even like Alberto Ferrato on the Honda, Paul Jonas as well, then Glenn probably would he still be sort of on the edge of the top 5? That's hard to say. I mean, I would give him maybe a C+. I would have expected a podium by now.
Ben Watson.
Yeah.
Hello. But, it's been just bang average, hasn't it? The most average of seasons for Coldenhoff. That's it. The most average of seasons. Speaking, this is completely irrelevant, but you saying about Louis Vosters and maybe going to another manufacturer triggered it. I know that some teams have inquired to Ducati about being like a secondary satellite team, and they said that they will be ready to have those conversations in 2026. So not next year. Next year will just be factory only.
Well, the conversations will happen next year for 26.
But they said they simply do not have enough bikes to supply a secondary team next year, which is obviously believable. I believe that it will really be not a bare bones operation, sounds bad, but to begin with, it will be the team has exactly what they need and nothing more.
Well, the thing is I think that's going to make it even more interesting and exotic, because it's going to be a real factory team. I mean, I don't think that people will be able to buy the bikes. They're going to be racing them. I'd like to see how they get around sort of the Supercross homologation by having, I mean, they could do like a limited edition. I'm not sure how many units has to be, like 500 or something. So yeah, you think that all the resources Ducati have to go into making the motorcycles fit for racing purposes are just going to be focusing on that factory team in MXGP as well as their Supercross effort. So, but yeah, I mean, you would imagine if they can get their shit together and get things pushed out of the factory doors, then a satellite team would probably be an attractive proposition. And if the bike is actually decent.
Small tangent, because this came up over the weekend. We know that the industry isn't in the healthiest position at the moment. Husqvarna won't be in MXGP next year, we do believe. And you just hear murmurings from different manufacturers. Numbers aren't what they were in COVID, etc., etc., etc. Have Triumph or Ducati read the situation wrong? Because publicly, both have said, our research says that motocross and the off-road sector is in such an unbelievably strong position. But then the major players who are here are kind of telling us that they're erring on the side of caution. So,
but it was always speculative, wasn't it? Because I mean, what if the FIM said, yeah, okay, Stark, you can come in and compete, and then Electric Bikes just wipes the floor of everybody in 2 years' time? Then Triumph and Ducati would have spent millions on an engine platform that is essentially going to become redundant or obsolete quicker than it would have done sort of in the mid 90s. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to say sort of, but the thing is, as well as it being like a sales thing, and let's be honest, dirt bike sales outside of say North America are minimal, then it's a branding operation. It's a way for Triumph and Ducati to be able to appeal to younger riders, a younger demographic. Buy our dirt bike, have fun on our dirt bike. By the way, we have an €18,000 bike called a Multistrada that will take you halfway across the world. You remember riding a Ducati as a motocross and you had fun? Well, now you can go anywhere and everywhere with this Multistrada. So it's that whole operation coming into it. And that's why the racing and the public perception of it is really important still.
Do you think we get to a point then? Because, yeah, you make a great point. Their intentions are very different to Honda, Kawasaki, KTM. Do you think that we get 4 years in, 2 years in, and someone high up is like, okay, so we're not really seeing much movement in terms of sales of road models. When we do our, our market research, we're not really seeing that a younger demographic is really engaging. This marketing ploy isn't working, done.
Yeah, you have to give it a sizable amount of time. I mean, I think the Aprilia V-twin lasted 7 or 8 years. It wasn't that long before Aprilia pulled the plug. Yeah, I mean, they were racing in 2004. And then by 2011, it was gone.
They were racing in 2004.
Yeah, I think their first Grand Prix was at Gallarate in 2004, 2005. And the project was, highly advanced, had a lot of investment. In terms of electronics alone, it was way above and beyond anything else that was in the gate at the time. So you have that as an example of big kind of speculative entry into motocross, but it actually doesn't end up working out at all. But then, yeah, Lewis, I think it really does hinge on not just sort of sporting performance, but how they really utilize it as a brand tool and a promotion tool and make it work for them. But just a little sort of tangent on that. The MotoGP recently in Assen, I think I probably told you, Jeffrey Herlings' factory edition was parked outside the Red Bull hospitality, and it was just like it was like a big plate of honey for like bees swarming around it all weekend. And there is an interest in dirt bikes. I mean, there is a fascination with it. And, I think, at the moment, the manufacturers seem to have a lot of stock that's unsold. There's a lot of bikes that still have to be pushed out of showroom floors. So that's an issue that has to be sort of addressed somehow. But no particular brand is safe. If you look in World Superbike, then Kawasaki have been the most powerful force in that championship for a number of years. And then from 2025, they're actually changing to Bimota by Kawasaki. So the green, this famous sort of color that's been part of that series for so long, is actually going to be fading away entirely. So it can be hard to predict what's going to happen.
When you see Herlings' bike gather so much attention at MotoGP, does it frustrate you because you're like, this is an attractive proposition, an attractive sport, I guess, at its core. More just needs to be done to expose it and capitalize on opportunities like this. If people would just get active and open their eyes and be aware of what is going on around them, then we could maybe make more of a dent. Like, do you feel like, does it make you think that, and I'm not talking about anyone in particular, just for sport as a whole, the sport as a whole rests on its laurels too much and is too much like Eeyore, to quote Winnie the Pooh, where like the sport is like, well, we are what we are. Nothing's ever going to change. We'll just keep doing this. And you see stuff like that, and it's like, well, no, like people do care if you would just put it in front of them.
Yeah, there is a conservative attitude around it. I mean, I've noticed that, but trying to work out how to make it bigger or better or more exposed is something that's been the talk of meetings in promoter sort of meeting rooms for the last 2 decades. And there have been sort of lukewarm attempts at different formats and different ways to present it. I mean, the clearest way to try and boost the sport is to give it TV coverage. But, if the kind of crux of your product is a 4-hour TV production, then you're only ever going to get so many views, particularly now on this era of instant gratification through, your mobile device or your tablet. And I think, if motocross or a sport similar to that wants to seek growth, then it does need to pivot to being something much more friendly for media digestion, particularly in young people's eyes. What is important is that people still do it. People still ride and they still get out on dirt bikes. And then you enter in a whole other mess of like space, sound, pollution, attitudes towards those subjects. It's Jesus, we could do about a series of podcasts on this. But we're just talking about Indonesia, saying, why are people being cynical about this sort of makeshift track in a sort of, an Asian island somewhere? If you don't have a go and try and take the sport to a new audience or new people, the last Indonesian Grand Prix, the Grand Prix of Lombok, that this podcast is focusing on, might have had 500 people there who have never seen a dirt bike or never seen a motocross race, and now they love it. Now they're following it on social media. Maybe now they're going to save up their money and go and buy some Tech 10s. I mean, that's a positive reverberation of the sport, and that's what you have to aim for.
Yeah, and I do believe that the general attitude in the sport is, well, we laugh at newcomers, don't we? We're not very accepting and open to people who are naive. And for instance, when I scroll through the MXGP Instagram comments, when I see Indonesian comments, I'm just like, keep scrolling. I don't, and it's wrong of me, like fully admitting that I'm also part of the problem in that way. But I don't know what it is. I don't even know how to quantify it or how to put it into words. But there's just a miscommunication there, a glitch in the matrix, just a bit of a stumbling block, and I don't know what it is or how it's solved.
How would you grade MXGP so far this year?
Well, 2022 was an F. So
yeah, 2021 was an A++. Yeah.
2023 was a solid return to form at a B. I mean, this has got
okay. B+, I'd say.
I want to give 2 grades. Overall, an A-, but not enough has been done to capitalize on the A-, so B.
Yeah, I would say a solid B+, just because we've missed some riders as well that I really thought would be creating some decent storylines. I mean, we've missed Renault, we've missed Gertz. The likes of Jonas provided a flash of something different, and then, drops away again, disappointingly.
And Watson.
So, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and Ben. We're missing Ben.
There we go. See, was that so hard? Was that so hard?
No.
Now I'll shut up.
No, it wasn't. We've only had 4 GP winners. What are the chances that we get another one? I mean, what are the chances that Jeremy Seewer or Calvin Vlaanderen wins a Grand Prix? They're pretty remote. And if we end the season with a 3-way battle going to the end of right to the end of the championship on a track we've never seen before in the middle of southern Spain where it's going to be 1,000,000 degrees, then fair enough. It could be a classic still, rival in 2021. But otherwise, if we just have 4 winners and it's done and dusted by then, you'll be thinking, shit, that was a bit of a shame.
Also, I do believe that you will see an AMA rider, at least one AMA rider, wildcarding at the last GP.
In Spain. I mean, who would be mad enough to do that?
Well, it makes sense. I think it makes sense, doesn't it? Why not just go get used to the rules, a bit of testing, start procedure, fuel, etc., etc. Like I think it makes a lot of sense.
What, for the nations?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, but again, this is an unseen track. It'd be different if it was like a classic MXGP venue. But no, I think there's a chance it could be a bit pokey.
Because who wants to turn up at Lockett? I would be scared stiff, and also Lommel. But a man-made track is kind of an even playing field. Sure, why not? I did have something to say apart from that, which I've just forgotten. Oh, Adam, you can't tell me that Tim Gajser has won 2 GPs and then count that we've had 4 GP winners this year. Pick a lane.
Why?
Because if you're telling me that I have to say Tim has won 2 GPs, then February has not won a GP, and therefore we've only had 3 winners this year.
February won in Trentino.
Did he?
Yeah.
Well, knock me down with a stick. I mean, no, he didn't.
Didn't he win in Trentino? He won a heat. He won a heat. Okay. He won a heat. Sorry, that was my information. Well, Paul's Jonas then. I mean, he won in
Oh,
Portugal.
Paul's Jonas, of course. How bad? Okay, that's bad of me. My mistake. I forgot about Paul's.
How can you forget the puddle and the podium celebration?
I feel bad now. But the bad thing is that conversation, me saying that there'd only been three winners, you saying Febvre won Trentino, none of us came off looking good.
Yeah.
That is an
This is an expert MXGP podcast. Can you edit all of that?
maybe I need to. That was not a good look for anyone.
Nah, leave it. It's okay.
I'll tell you what, I will give an A+ to All Balls Racing. The All Balls Racing Group is a combination of the finest aftermarket power sports brands from across the US and Europe, combining OEM level engineering and design capabilities with a world-class supply chain makes them the largest global supplier of critical aftermarket hard parts for the power sports industry. You can trust the All Balls Racing Group to provide the exact fitment and best quality in the industry at a price that fits your budget. All Balls Racing have everything to keep you running. Another
Lewis,
tangent.
should we do a couple of? Oh, you can do another tangent. I'll say, should we do a couple of grades in MX2?
Yeah, we'll do a couple of. It's MX2. We'll probably do one and then call the podcast. That's kind of.
I have a question for you about MX2 as well.
Okay, well, let me do this first. Herlings won his 201st Moto in Indonesia, or did he? Because there seems to be I think you call it a discretion.
Discrepancy?
Discrepancy. I call it 201, but there are people who do not count his super final MX2 win because technically he didn't reach the checkered flag first, but he was the first MX2 rider to reach the checkered flag. So do you count that as a moto win or not? I do.
Yeah, I think you have to, because that was the rule at the time. And he was the first MX2 guy past the flag. So therefore he ranked
you can't
number
count
one.
it as a seventh or whatever it was in its mixed capacity rankings.
No, that's like finishing 14th in the Motocross of the Nations, but you're still the first MX2 guy. I mean, it's counted.
Yeah, no one says. Everyone acknowledges that you were first MX2, not 14.
Exactly.
Well then, yeah, by my count then, including that, 201 moto wins. The first moto in Lombok 2 was his 200th. Phenomenal. 200
and 105 GP wins, right?
Yeah, and just for clarification, 201 moto wins, and he has started 365 motos. Of course, it's an odd number because it's Jeffrey. So,
It is an amazing record.
Your MX2 question.
My MX2 question: Sacha Coenen. Do you like watching him, and is he exciting, or do you watch him thinking accident waiting to happen, and you do my head in because you weigh next to nothing, so you're always going to hold shot?
First of all, Sacha Coenen and drones are definitely your little pre-Latvia, I was indifferent and I was like, oh, he's leading. Well, in a minute he'll crash. Post-Latvia and Majura, I'm now more intrigued when he's running up front because there does feel like a chance that it is sustainable. But ultimately, when he crashes, I'm like, okay, let's get on.
Which is what he did in Indonesia last weekend.
Yeah. Yes. Then I'm like, okay, let's just get on with the actual race now. Like, oh, okay, that didn't work.
And as a follow-up on that question, should somebody like him, as stupid a question as this is, should there be a need for like ballast and a minimum weight?
I'm trying to think if there's anyone close to him, height or weight wise.
Because I mean, Tom Vial was light and he's not the tallest guy. Okay. And obviously he had sort of the same propensity for amazing hole shots, which is a distinct advantage. And if there's anything, apart from a couple of really good motos by Sacha, the main sort of MO of his form in the second half of this season, the second sort of phase of the championship so far has been that he starts and then tends to lag a little bit and other riders establish a rhythm that are better and they overtake him. So you could say by being small and diminutive, he's going to be lacking maybe the strength or the stamina of other riders such as Akai de Wolf. But then, so that strength from the whole shot and that advantage is erodes somewhat. So is there a need to have any kind of rider and machine minimum weight.
In a weird way, I quite like that because it just adds another element to what we do, you know, just another thing to look into, another thing to watch for, another process aside from just dropping the gate and going racing. On the Sacha Coenen point, I believe that now he can crash as much as he likes because he won Latvia and he won Majora. So that saves him. That no matter what happens the rest of the way, he won 2 GPs. That's great. The potential's there. KTM will continue to buy into that. If he hadn't won those 2 GPs and continued like this the whole way, then I think you've got issues because 2 years of that is a long time without any noted progression. But we did have noted progression, so it works, I think.
Yeah, it's a decent sophomore season, that's for sure. I mean, next year you'd have to be saying to him, listen, calm down. You've obviously got the speed, you can hold shot like anybody else. So it's a matter of putting some consistency together and being a championship contender. You could say Lucas has been a bit error prone as well, but then he's also been able to stump up and make those 1-1s happen. And that's why the sort of the bigger twin you would like is a bit more formidable at this point. And he had his mistakes and he had his Sacha Coenen season in 2023.
Yeah.
But I when I'm watching him, I'm thinking, I admire the attitude so much. I love the way that he attacks. The whole shots are sort of becoming very boringly inevitable now, just because he is minuscule. And, after that, I just hope he stays on the motorcycle. But I was thinking, is that like an advantage that should be compensated somehow? I don't know.
It is, yeah, that is actually very interesting. That's actually very interesting. My mind is,
I mean, who else in the US? I mean, we're talking the Martin brothers, perhaps, who are that small.
Although they're similar in looks, I just feel like there is something much more fragile about Sacha Coenen. And maybe that's just the optics of Sacha crashing all the time, which leads me to subconsciously feel like there's more of a weak aspect there. But so yeah, although there's a lot of small riders, like I feel like Sacha is especially fragile. But maybe that's just because he's young, or not young, but inexperienced and new. I mean, he is young, but that isn't.
Oh, he's young. I mean, 17, and if you listen to some of his comments post-race, they are from a 17-year-old. I mean, do you remember being 17? It's just bananas. You should be in school, as I keep saying.
The flip side, Jeffrey Herlings was a 2-time world champion, 1-time world champion?
Yeah, I mean, he was racing when he was 15. Yeah, I think 1-time world champion. He must have won his first one when he was 17.
Winner.
Yeah.
Like it's
Prado. Prado was a Grand Prix winner when he was 16.
That's the issue. It's a moving scale because on one hand you do want to say, oh, 17, that's so young to be doing this, but then you're like, well, they did it, and it's not just one person. Yeah. There's a catalogue of riders who did it.
Well, there's a minimum age limit now in MotoGP, for example. I mean, to ride in Moto3, which is the equivalent of, say, MX2, you need to be 18. And I think that's correct, especially in that case where you're letting teenagers essentially ride 150-mile-an-hour motorcycles. I think there has to be a certain basic level of maturity, both physically, mentally, in terms of experience, coming through the various filter systems for road racing to be able to enter the World Championship. But, it seems like the Coenens just sort of skip right through Europeans and went straight into Grand Prix.
Yeah, we are a bit basic in that regard, aren't we? Like, we just don't have much. There aren't many layers to what we do. Just go racing, and if you win, you win, and if you don't, you don't. But that's kind of it.
I mean, what's the obsession with getting 15, 16-year-olds into Grand Prix? I mean, I understand they maybe have a level where they're beating everybody else, amateur level in the US especially. Then, where else do you go to ride? But then, there is, in theory, quite a long time to be able to race a dirt bike professionally. You don't need to be absolutely in anguish if you're not having a factory contract by the age of 18.
The obsession is that Herlings, Roczen, Prado set the benchmark, and they set a standard where now people are like, you have to do that if you want to be as good as them. Again, that's maybe
well, Jet Lawrence too.
Yeah. And there's even more riders who didn't quite hit those heights, but were top 5 and solid and there, you know? So it's an obsession to follow the crowd. No one wants to march to the beat of their own drum. Completely different tangent. We may never grade MX2, but it's fine. Different tangent. Has there ever been a more obscure Grand Prix on the calendar than the Grand Prix of Bali?
Well, we did have a Grand Prix of Oman,
I feel like
which never
Bali,
happened.
especially I feel like Bali is basically the same as like, hey, we've got the Grand Prix of Disney coming up.
Oh yeah, or a Grand Prix of Hawaii.
Exactly. But Oman is at least a country. It's in the Middle East. We've done Qatar. You know, you can make sense of it. And Bali came and went so quickly as well. It wasn't on the calendar for long. I completely forgot about it until something triggered my memory this weekend, and I was like, we must talk about the Bali Grand Prix, but never happened. I heard
Well, go on.
that it was going to be basically there was a hotel on a beach, and it was going to be a track made out of sand on the beach, basically like Western beach race, but motocross track between the hotel and the sea. That's what I heard it was. You laugh.
That sounds ridiculous.
Okay.
Yeah. But I do know most Europeans' kind of stereotypical reaction to hearing the Grand Prix of Bali is like, oh, fantastic. I mean, it is this sort of divine holiday destination. You're going to put a motocross Grand Prix there? Perfect.
I wonder if going to Bali would have changed the game. Like, that would have made Indonesia an attractive proposition? Would we have got attention from further afield? Like, imagine your MotoGP friends when you say, "Oh, I've got to watch the Grand Prix of Bali today." They'd be like, "What? What's that? How's that possible?" You know, I feel like that could have been.
Everybody's trackside in swimsuits and bikinis, sipping cocktails. It would have been
kind of what I had
life.
in mind. Yeah, maybe I was naive. I don't know, but you know what? We discussed the idea of doing a podcast about all of this stuff. I need to sit down with David and be like, right, David, I need 30 minutes and I've got a list. Omar,
Dan.
Bali, or Dan. Dan is a Grand Prix of Bali sort of guy. Dan would be all over that. But yeah, just like, right, Oman, what was the plan? Bali, what was the plan? Malaysia, what was the plan? What else has there been?
I know that Infront, or was it Ustream at the time? Yeah, it would have been Ustream. Actually went to Sepang International Circuit in Malaysia and looked where they could lay out the track. So it was close to happening.
Yeah, Dan gets around. Dan really clocks up some air miles. You kind of
I know the FIM as well went to Iran to have meetings about a Grand Prix. Imagine that one.
I think we've said this. Nothing sticks out more in my memory than my first year covering the sport. Ray Archer walking past me and saying, "Do you want to do this?" And me going, "Yeah." And him going, "Well, we're going to fucking Iran. I'm not going to Iran. They can sod off." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to go to Iran. Like, I've never been to Italy, let alone Iran." Yeah, Iran. Like, what was the plan? Like, how was that a good idea?
Listen, it probably was just a meeting. It never even got on a provisional calendar, so we probably can't talk about it that much.
What was the most recent one? Vietnam. Where did Vietnam go?
Yeah. Well, these people obviously sign a contract, almost like a letter of intent, maybe even put like a down payment, like a deposit to have their place in the calendar. Because let's not forget, to be on the provisional calendar, you need to have an existing contract or you need to have signed a prelim contract. I mean, because that's also a bit of a bargaining chip as well, because Infront and the FIM say, well, look, here you are, here's your date in September. So stump up the cash, get ready. We've displaced another event or another country for you. So it's, and by the other side of it, they've also given dates and places to, certain Grand Prix and territories to say, we've included you and you still have these sort of debts outstanding. So what are we going to do?
I mean, I don't believe that this is the standard anymore, but pre-COVID, we were getting the calendar for the following year between the first couple of weeks of July. It was normally between the Indonesian triple header. So maybe we get that soon. I don't know. I doubt it, because for the last 2 years, it has been incredibly delayed. I believe that everyone revolted and was like, we don't want a calendar that's not even close. Like, just keep it to
Hey, listen, it's still not easy as well. And, you see it on MotoGP as well, where cancellation of the Argentine Grand Prix happened. They had a plan to go to Kazakhstan. That was displaced to replace India, which has been bumped to next year. And it turns out that the track in Kazakhstan might not be completely ready. So that's going to be scrapped in replacement of another European round, possibly even one in Spain, where there's already 4 Grand Prix. So I don't think it's easy to find new places or new partners at the moment, sort of in sports promotion. Formula One are just mining North America, of course, for that new big audience they have, courtesy of Netflix, it would seem. But yeah, maybe MXGP are a little bit more conservative again, or cautious in their approach of publishing a 2025 calendar.
Yeah, I believe once bitten, twice shy would probably sum up their approach. We need to talk about MX2 quickly. Well done to everyone involved. We're proud of you as always.
No, Kaida Wolf, A+. Keep it going.
Yeah, still unbelievable. But let me ask you this. Who is most likely to be world champion considering their current positions? Tim Gajser or Kaida Wolf?
Oh, that's really tough.
Yeah,
It is because, Gajser has the threat from Prado and Herlings, like we said, and the Wolf really has to look over his shoulder at his teammate. I think that's the only real threat, isn't it? Because Lagenfelder, even though he looked pretty impressive at times in Indonesia, I think it's going to be a Husqvarna slugfest. And I think rather than who really excels, it's going to be who drops the ball the most, who sort of, makes the mistakes and loses the points.
Well, I think that Kai is definitely more of a risk of costing himself points, whereas I believe that you can count on Gajser to be more reliable. Yeah, but A+ for Kaida Wolf.
Well, it's also, there's been 2 different halves of the season. I mean, Kai picked up 6 sort of podiums. Well, not even 6. I mean, 4 or 5 in the first sort of 7 or 8 rounds, and then it's been more of a swing towards Lucas in sort of the later phase. I mean, that triple of victories in Spain. What was the Grand Prix after Spain? Before St. John, so it's Spain and then France and then Germany. I mean, taking those 3 wins really, really put him straight back into contention. So towards the middle of the season, he's been the stronger one.
Yeah, interesting dynamic. Lucas Coenen, I almost would go A+ again. Certainly an A at minimum.
Yeah. He's looked stronger, less prone to mistakes, even though he's still making them compared to last year. So that's an improvement. I would say an A. I mean, Kai's really emerged as like a world championship contender. Like, catch me, guys, I'm wearing the red plate every week. And, amongst sort of some of my Dutch colleagues in MotoGP, people are more aware of him and what he's doing. It's not just Jeffrey Herlings as the only Dutch figure in sort of off-road motorsport. But yeah, I think Kai's done a slightly better job so far. But Lucas is really breathing down his neck.
If you remember last week, we had the discussion about whether Simon Lagenfelder was Clement Dessau, Gautier Paulin. Someone tweeted me. Oh, now I can't remember what the tweet was. I think the tweet was Andrea Adamo is David Philipparts. And that is perfect. Absolutely perfection. Brilliant.
Yeah. I think David was maybe a little bit more temperamental, a little bit more focus is the wrong word, but really dead set on victory, whereas Andrea is a little bit more thoughtful, maybe a bit more, has a few more race smarts. But if you're looking just the result sheets, then you could draw parallels, I guess.
Yeah, like one-time world champion, capitalized once and then kind of never was back in the fight. That to me screams Adamo. And then occasional Grand Prix victories. Adamo doesn't have one yet, but I'm sure he will get occasional. I don't believe that he will ever go on a run of 4 in a row. Yeah, brilliant. Just
Andrea was good as well in Indonesia. That second moto charge back through. I mean, after hitting Liam Everts, which was a bit rash, and afterwards he stopped short of apologizing to him, bizarrely, but he said it was his fault and he was overly aggressive to trying to move up the inside there and took them both down. Interestingly, in MX2 this year, there's only also been 4 GP winners, and Liam has been one of those. I'm surprised he hasn't been, a little bit more forceful at the front.
Yeah, it is weird because Liam, when he was weak and building himself back up, was winning. And then now you would think he's 100%. He's not. Kind of a tough one to understand. So who else wins an MX2 GP this year? We've had Kai, Lucas, Sacha, Liam. Does Andrea get one? Does Simon get one?
Based a little bit on his riding as well in Indonesia, maybe Mikael Harrop. He's kind of an outlier. I mean, it would be really cool if he can give Triumph a Grand Prix win in their first season. But yeah, I mean, Adamo has yet to win a race. He's won a Moto this year, 2 in fact, and he hasn't won a Grand Prix overall. So if I had to put my money on someone who hasn't won yet and who's going to win next, then it probably would be the world champion. But I mean, Harrop's looking strong.
I think one more rider gets a GP win. I would want to bet on Simon, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Andrea. But if either of them go the entire year without winning a GP, then it's a categoric disaster because winning one GP would have been the bare minimum that either of them expected. Obviously, both of them would have wanted to be world champion outright. And let's end the MX2 gradings with Simon. Just a straight thing. It's not exactly. I mean, it's been fine. You can't really pick holes in it, but if you had higher expectations, which some of us did, and those journalists who had higher expectations and said that he should win half of the GPs, they shouldn't be laughed at. No, they should be respected.
No, they should be pitied.
Yeah, or applauded even. I have a lot of respect for the journalist that said that. I feel like he really, I understand where he was coming from. Brilliant perspective. And yeah, just really a lot of respect for that.
Wide of the mark, horrendously wide of the mark. And I would agree with your grade. I maybe even say a B- for Simon. Okay, he broke his collarbone, but he's only won 1 Moto, hasn't won a Grand Prix, but oddly has the same amount of podiums as Kai de Wolf.
He's Clement de Sal.
So
second and third on the podium. Just get Lagenfelder to Nastar, and then he will turn around.
It's the same bike.
He needs to be in Belgium. Get out of Italy. Or stay on Ducati and get out of Italy. One of those. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to get off your chest?
No, that's it. Obviously, Lockett next and Lommel, the 2 L's.
Will the third L turn up to Lommel? Stay tuned.
Oh, yes. Yeah, get on the plane, Lewis. Come on.
Well, I just realized, so you can't see it, but on our YouTube feed, we have a bar at the bottom with like championship standings, next event. And it just came up with the Lommel date. And I found out I was looking at flights for the wrong date. So I now need to restart that process.
That would have been an expensive booking if you'd hit buy.
Lommel is always the first weekend of August, no? Like August the 4th, August the 5th. Like I just kind of default to that. I feel like it's a weekend earlier this year. Anyway, also, let me tell you quickly, Adam, because I know you want to hear about this. EVS Sports, the original protective gear company, has been protecting champions and riders for almost 30 years and does not plan to stop anytime soon. What started out as one knee brace has evolved into a full line of protective gear to help keep riders safe whilst they do what they love. Check out evs-sports.com to see the same protective gear that pros RJ Hampshire, Kyle Chisholm, Axel Hodges, and Travis Pastrana all wear every day. Thank you to EVS, thank you to All Balls Racing, and thank you to Polosport. Yeah, my final thoughts are I have none. So
I'm hungry.
I actually am. So I will get to that. Thank you, Adam Wheeler from the Paddock Pass podcast. Have you done a podcast about Lewis Hamilton potentially buying a MotoGP team?
No, it was a little bit of a topic of chat in Germany last weekend, but then also not too much to the story. So we didn't really take it that seriously.
Oh, okay. I just feel like you could really capitalize with a podcast on that and maybe have a couple of 100,000 viewers.
Nah.
Okay. Okay, well, despite that lack of enthusiasm, please go and check out the Paddock podcast. I'm sure that there's more enthusiasm on the actual podcast than about potential topics.
For sure.
1 weekend off now, and then we will be back to discuss Lockett in 2 weeks' time. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching, and we will see you real soon.